Are you tired of living someone else's version of your life? Are you ready to discover the wisdom that your soul has been whispering all along? If this resonates with you, if you're seeking authentic inspiration for living your truth, then you're in the right place. This channel is dedicated to exploring timeless wisdom from history's greatest thinkers and poets. People like Emily Dickinson, who chose authenticity over approval, depth over surface, truth over convenience. Every week, we journey together into these profound teachings that can transform how you see yourself and if you're ready to stop performing and start living, if you want to learn from the masters of authentic existence, then hit that subscribe button and ring the notification. Because what we're about to explore with Emily Dickinson might just change everything you thought you knew about finding your true self. Now, let's begin this journey within. There comes a moment in every life when the noise of the world falls silent, and you hear something deeper calling from within. A voice that has been waiting patiently beneath the surface, speaking a language older than words, more honest than any mask you've ever worn. Emily Dickinson knew this voice intimately. She called it the soul's truth, and she spent her entire life learning to listen to it, to trust it, to live by its quiet wisdom. In a world that constantly tells us who we should be, how we should think, what we should want, Emily discovered something revolutionary. The soul always knows its truth. But here's what makes this discovery both liberating and terrifying. Listening to your soul's truth often means walking away from everything others expect of you. Emily Dickinson was born into a world with very clear expectations for women. Marriage, motherhood, social obligations, religious conformity. The path was laid out like stones across a river, each step predetermined, each choice already made by society's invisible hand. But Emily's soul whispered something different. It spoke of solitude as sacred, of poetry as prayer, of a life lived inward rather than outward. And though the world called her strange, reclusive, even broken, she chose to trust what her soul knew to be true. This is the first lesson Emily teaches us about authenticity. Your soul's truth may not make sense to others, but it doesn't have to. It only has to make sense to you. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most yourself, most at peace. Were you performing for an audience, or were you simply being? Were you following someone else's script, or were you listening to the quiet voice within? Emily discovered that the soul speaks not in shoulds and musts, but in whispers of recognition. It says, "This feels true. This feels like home. This feels like me." But why is it so difficult to hear this voice? Why do we spend years, sometimes decades, living lives that feel borrowed from someone else? Because from the moment we're born, we're taught to look outside ourselves for validation. We learn to read the room before we learn to read our hearts. We become experts in what others want from us and amateurs in what we want for ourselves. The world is loud with its demands. Be successful. Be liked. Be normal. Be productive. Follow the path. Fit the mold. Don't rock the boat. And slowly, imperceptibly, we begin to mistake these external voices for our own internal wisdom. But Emily shows us that beneath all this noise, the soul continues its patient vigil, waiting for us to remember that we are more than the sum of others' expectations. She wrote, "I dwell in possibility." This single line contains the essence of authentic living, the recognition that your life is not a fixed destination, but an endless exploration of who you truly are. Emily's choice to live as a recluse was not an escape from life, but a journey deeper into it. While others rushed through social obligations, she cultivated the art of inner listening. While others sought validation in crowds, she found wholeness in solitude. Her small, white house in Amherst became a laboratory of the soul, where she conducted the most important experiments of all. What brings me joy? What stirs my spirit? What feels authentic to my deepest self? She discovered that authentic living is not about grand gestures or public declarations. It's about the thousands of small choices between what feels true and what feels expected, between what your soul whispers and what the world shouts. Every morning, Emily chose her truth over convention. She wrote poetry instead of making social calls. She tended her garden instead of attending church. She wore white when fashion demanded color. She stayed home when society demanded participation. These might seem like small rebellions, but they were acts of profound courage. Because every time you choose your authentic self over your performed self, you declare that your inner truth matters more than outer approval. This is what Emily understood that many of us forget. Authenticity is not a destination you reach, but a practice you cultivate. It's not something you discover once and then possess forever. It's a daily choice to listen to your soul's quiet wisdom, even when the world is screaming its demands. But here's where Emily's lesson becomes both beautiful and challenging. living authentically often requires sacrifice. Emily sacrificed conventional success for inner peace. She sacrificed social approval for artistic integrity. She sacrificed the safety of conformity for the adventure of self-discovery. And this is where many of us stumble. We want to be authentic, but we also want to be liked. We want to follow our truth, but we also want to meet expectations. We want to be ourselves, but we also want to fit in. Emily teaches us that these desires are often incompatible. Authenticity requires choosing your inner compass over external validation. It means disappointing some people in order to remain true to yourself. But here's what she discovered in return. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you become something precious to yourself. When you stop performing for approval, you start living for joy. When you stop betraying your soul to please others, you find a peace that no external validation can provide. Emily's poetry became her way of speaking her truth. In a world where women's voices were often silenced, she found a language for her deepest self. Her poems were not performances but revelations, not entertainment but communion with truth. She wrote about death when others spoke only of life. She explored doubt when others professed certainty. She celebrated solitude when others feared loneliness. She questioned everything when others accepted blindly. This is another crucial aspect of authenticity. Speaking your truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable, even when it challenges the status quo, even when it reveals parts of yourself you've been taught to hide. Your soul's truth is not always pleasant. It includes your shadows along with your light, your questions along with your certainties, your struggles along with your triumphs. Emily understood that authentic living means embracing all of yourself, not just the parts others find acceptable. She wrote, "Tell all the truth but tell it slant." This wasn't about deception, but about finding ways to honor your complete truth in a world that often prefers comfortable lies. Sometimes your truth needs to be whispered. Sometimes it needs to be lived quietly. Sometimes it needs to be expressed through art, through choices, through the way you love. But it always needs to be honored. Emily's journey within teaches us that self-discovery is not a luxury for the privileged, but a necessity for the human soul. Without it, we become hollow, going through the motions of life without ever truly living. But with it, even the smallest life becomes infinite, even the quietest existence becomes profound, even the most ordinary moments become sacred. Emily rarely left her father's house, yet she traveled farther into herself than most people journey in a lifetime. She wrote nearly 1,800 poems, each one a map of her inner landscape, a record of her soul's discoveries. Her physical world was small, but her inner world was vast. She found galaxies in her garden, eternity in her room, universe in her solitude. This is what happens when you commit to authenticity. Your inner life becomes rich beyond measure. You discover depths in yourself you never knew existed. You find resources of strength, creativity, and wisdom that no external achievement can provide. But Emily's lesson goes deeper than personal fulfillment. She shows us that when you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. Your truth, however quietly lived, becomes a beacon for others lost in performance. Every poem she wrote was an invitation. You too can trust your inner voice. You too can choose authenticity over approval. You too can find your way home to yourself. Even though she lived in relative isolation, her authentic voice now speaks to millions. Her truth, discovered in solitude, resonates across centuries. Her journey within has guided countless others on their own path to self-discovery. This is the paradox of authentic living. The more deeply you journey into yourself, the more universal your truth becomes. The more specifically you become yourself, the more you connect with others. So how do we apply Emily's wisdom to our modern lives? How do we learn to trust our soul's truth in a world even noisier than hers? First, we must create space for inner listening. Emily had her white dress, her garden, her room. You need your own sacred space, your own time for silence, your own practices for tuning into your inner. This might be morning pages, meditation, long walks, or simply moments of stillness where you ask yourself, what is true for me right now? Second, we must learn to distinguish between our authentic voice and the internalized voices of others. The soul speaks with gentle certainty. It doesn't scream or demand. It doesn't shame or threaten. It simply recognizes truth the way you recognize home. Third, we must be willing to disappoint. Emily disappointed her neighbors who expected social visits. She disappointed suitors who wanted marriage. She disappointed family members who wanted conventional success. But she never disappointed her soul. Living authentically means accepting that you cannot please everyone and choosing to please the one person you'll spend your entire life with, yourself. Fourth, we must trust the process of becoming. Emily didn't discover her truth all at once. She wrote, reflected, experimented, and evolved. Authenticity is not a fixed state, but a dynamic relationship with your evolving self. Be patient with your journey. Trust your questions as much as your answers. Allow yourself to change, to grow, to surprise even yourself with who you're becoming. Finally, we must remember that authenticity is not about perfection, but about truth. Emily's truth included doubt, struggle, and darkness. Your authenticity doesn't require you to be flawless, but to be real. Emily Dickinson spent her life proving that the soul always knows its truth. Sometimes that truth asks you to stand alone. Sometimes it asks you to speak when others are silent. Sometimes it asks you to be still when others are moving. Sometimes it asks you to choose love over fear, depth over surface, meaning over convenience. But always, it asks you to be yourself. Your soul has been waiting patiently for you to remember who you truly are beneath all the masks, beyond all the expectations, deeper than all the roles you play. It knows your truth, has always known it, will always know it. The question is not whether your soul knows. It does. The question is whether you're ready to listen, to trust, to live by that quiet, persistent wisdom. Emily spent her life saying yes to that question. She chose her truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, self-discovery over self-abandonment. And in doing so, she became not just a poet, but a testament to the power of living from the inside out. Her invitation to you is simple but profound. Trust your soul. It knows. It has always known. And when you finally listen, you'll discover that the journey within is the greatest adventure of all. The soul always knows its truth. The only question is, are you ready to live it? Emily Dickinson's journey reminds us that the most important conversation we'll ever have is the one with our own soul. She chose to listen to that quiet voice within, and it led her to create some of the most profound poetry in human history. But here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to be a poet to live this truth. You just have to be willing to listen to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. If Emily's story has stirred something in you today, if you're feeling that gentle nudge toward greater authenticity, then I want to invite you to take the next step on this journey with us. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're just getting started exploring the wisdom of history's most authentic souls. And here's what I'm curious about. What is one truth your soul has been whispering that you've been afraid to acknowledge? What is one small step you could take today toward living more authentically? Share it in the comments below. Your vulnerability might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to start their own journey within. Also, if you know someone who's struggling to find their authentic voice, someone who's tired of performing and ready to start living, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need permission to be ourselves, and Emily's story gives us exactly that permission. Until next time, remember, your soul knows its truth. Trust it. Honor it. Live it. The world needs the gift that only your authentic self can offer. Thanks for joining me on this journey within. I'll see you in the next video.